A new record-breaking billion-dollar superliner rules the waves of luxury cruising. But this is the drama.
We don't need luck.
Intrigue. And the world-first engineering feats that pioneering shipbuilders and designers achieved to craft a city at sea. The biggest cruise ship in the world.
The process is very intense.
The highs.
Woo, it's a long way down.
And lows.
The grandest ship I think the world has ever seen.
Of the world record cruise ship. There's a simple analogy to describe one of the most complicated construction jobs imaginable. A giant Lego set made of massive 4-story blocks of decking and streamlined sections of hull. Fixed together with almost 2,500 kilometers of welding join. It's a simple explanation for a $1.4 billion design and construction ordeal for thousands of craftsmen, architects and designers. It turned out that pioneering innovations and technology could only fit into a record-breaking design.
You know, the bridge on the Oasis of the Seas is without question one of the most sophisticated bridges on any ship in the world of any type.
And the smallest control can steer the world's largest cruise ship.
Despite her size, we can control her. This little joystick right here is something that I can actually use to maneuver the ship.
Captain Bill Wright and crew have a huge responsibility.
There's a lot to get used to in being able to comfortably and confidently navigate and maneuver a ship like the Oasis of the Seas. So there's a pretty steep learning curve.
For the cruise line's chief of new building, the pioneering atrium design was the realization of a dream.
10-15 years ago, I had first time some thoughts about a vessel which could be about this size and where we could really utilize the open atrium concept and build a vessel all this time. It's a live stream coming true.
Before such innovations could become a reality, an international team of architects thrashed out competing plans, while the Finnish shipbuilder determined whether the ideas were viable. As well as a giant atrium and the biggest swimming pool on any ship in the world, there was another proposed first, a merry-go-round, something that normally requires solid, stable ground. The idea put some in a spin.
You're not actually going to have a massive view along the boardwalk anyway.
Is there a clear enough pathway so that it's convenient if all you want to do is get from here to there? Nobody is receptive to criticism, but they all recognize, all of us recognize, that by working together and by arguing, I would say arguing rather than criticizing, we come up with a better product.
But no matter how appealing ideas and designs were, they had to be realistic. Artistic visions had to be turned into a viable and luxurious steel ship, on time and on budget. For the shipyard manager, this meant encouraging the design team to stick to the plans, and a typical builder's wish.
As simple as possible.
At least you're consistent.
Yeah, it's so that there is an architect's schedule, which is very, very precise, and it defines when certain decisions have to be made. And as you saw right in there, maybe they're never now asking for changes that is clearly too late, according to this schedule. And those, of course, then when those appear, then we have to raise the red flag, as I did. If we have to change, then we have to redesign all these things. That takes time and it takes money.
What they finally set out to build was a city at sea, able to carry almost 8,500 passengers and crew. Until the ship was christened many years down the line, the unique project was codenamed Genesis. It would take the equivalent of 8,000 man-years to complete, with more than 3,000 workers on site at any time. The construction was based on the merging of grand blocks. A total of 181 grand blocks were produced. The 4-deck high blocks made up the 8 decks with staterooms. Towards the ship's stern, the curved blocks outline what would become the ship's star attractions, including a boardwalk, an open-air aqua theatre. But while construction of the ship's main body continued, designers were still working on plans for the upper decks. British architect Kevin Johnson presented a grassy park design for the floor of the ship's main atrium. But Captain Bill Wright wasn't convinced.
And the large lawn area as it runs down, complete with all of its shrubbery and its planting.
And yet we have these two, what apparently huge areas on the mounds, on the hills, that just aren't exciting to me. I just don't get it. I mean, there's nothing there. Why should I go up that hill? To get the view, I don't think that's particularly spectacular. It seems like maybe we just need something. It looks very naked.
I think part of the reason that you have that feeling is because this is now such a dominant part of what is grass.
But if there was a nice alcove there with the bushes and a little nice wooden bench I could sit in with maybe some trickling water where I could read my book, I just don't think people are going to throw out the tablecloth and lie on the grass and eat a sandwich. I don't think that's going to happen.
For the skipper, the most critical design is that of the bridge, and monitoring equipment enabling the crew to see everything around the hull.
There's plenty of keyboards, that's for sure. But not a lot of space to...
The ship's vast bulk has created a blind spot.
What we're really trying to do now is using the advanced 3D technology that allows us actually to experience the bridge. One of the concerns in terms of maneuvering is that because of the placement of the lifeboats on Genesis, when you're standing on the bridge wing, you actually cannot see the side of the ship. If you had a very large vessel, let's say a private yacht somewhere in the vicinity of 150 feet, it could actually be completely hidden by the flare of the bow. So you could have that large of a vessel literally right under your nose. And so now, for the first time, we're actually going to have to rely on television cameras to give us that perspective that on every other ship in our fleet, you have in a natural visual sense.
In Gothenburg, Sweden, 2 architects perfected the model for a design meeting at the shipyard. Three-dimensional models bring plans alive and help solve practical problems. Like how to avoid exposing passengers to howling winds or engine exhaust on the upper open decks.
I think where we still are struggling with the most difficult area is actually the solarium in the front area here. So we have a lot of studies to do in wind tunnels and so on to see that the wind is actually behaving as we want it to do. So not everything is blowing away in the forward part of the ship.
Designers went to a wind tunnel facility near Copenhagen to evaluate the aerodynamic properties of the ship.
Going through enough, yes.
Before building started on the upper decks, the design team wanted to ensure that the proposed superstructure was sound. Using a model in the wind tunnel, they could simulate real sailing conditions and various wind speeds from all directions. Sensitive probes pinpointed the airflow at specific areas all over the upper decks. For example, it could determine whether the site for a planned swimming pool would be too windy. Project leader Holger Koss also wanted to ensure that diesel gases from the funnel didn't blow down on passengers below.
I turn to 30 degrees. 10, 20, 30. So let's have a look at the solarium.
The architects gambled that a half-open solarium deck up front wouldn't expose passengers to howling winds.
It's basically quite high above the ship.
Looks good.
But test results were no guarantee their groundbreaking design would work. With construction of the hull and lower decks already underway, architects creating the all-important upper decks of the world's biggest cruise ship faced a critical judgment. An idea to create a grassy park in the center had already been rejected.
When we initially heard that we would potentially be eliminating the lawns and the hills from Central Park, we went into a momentary period of shock.
The British architects responsible were ordered back to the drawing board.
Collectively, the whole team have had 8 weeks to change the scheme throughout the whole of this space.
To step back and to have a complete rethink is a difficult point at which you have to arrive at. To turn your back on something that you've worked with for so long is difficult.
That's the first time we've got this amount of natural light down into Royal Promenade. It looks absolutely superb, doesn't it?
Wow, it's really good.
What's it look like?
It's there's so much light that comes down in there. I'm very happy with what we see here. It's just a complete tapestry of events, and I think it's going to look stunning.
Another high-flying feature also created an early sensation.
It's a new thing, actually. You zip yourself. This is a line, and you hook yourself. You slide down the wire here, and underneath you have 7 decks below. It's quite deep, actually. It's really a thrilling experience.
This is exciting.
I feel that this is just outstanding.
Our process is that we have to make so many of these decisions 2 years, 3 years before the ship delivers, and we better get them right. But when you see this, it's so wonderful and it's so clearly well thought through that you feel comfortable in going ahead and cutting the steel.
Steel cutting was already well underway when vigorous debate was continuing over plans for the upper decks. Although delivery was still more than 2 years away, there was no time to lose to start the process of building the top section. Once design elements were approved, the steel pieces needed to build them were cut from plate, around 500,000 pieces in total. Computer-controlled plasma cutters worked at such high temperatures, cutting had to be done underwater. Big or small, every piece had to be numbered and marked for assembly. While the 4-deck blocks were stacked at the shipyard awaiting assembly, interior designers worked on the fittings, furnishings and decor needed to appoint the luxury suites. Scale models were built to test the designs before the real cabins were put together.
There should be a damper. There should be a damper on that.
No, we wanted to
Or do
wrap.
you want this to come all the way?
We wanted to wrap the panel.
The cruise line's CEO, Richard Fain, took a critical passenger's eye view of the layout of a state room.
Well, if I was the only one that laid down the bed, it's because I'm the laziest in the group.
His unique perspective pinpointed a problem.
But the lights here, I just find the direct down lights a little bit commercial, a little bit ordinary. What do you think?
The luxury loft suites were a novelty selling point, potential big money earners that had to be right.
We had a lot of involvement ourselves in the loft suites and the designs of the loft suites, and it holds a soft space in my heart, and I love it a lot, and it really, I think, symbolizes some of the great things that we can do. We're particularly proud of this one because we designed this one with the in-house design department, so we feel pretty good. Pretty good.
At the shipyard, workers didn't need to wait for the final say on the design of suites and cabins. Dangling from a crane, the giant Lego pieces, or 4-deck tall grand block sections, had to be positioned together with minute precision. The operation depended on the steady hand of the crane operator, maneuvering tons of steel dangling above his workmates below. The grand blocks were accurately positioned and winched together using a virtual three-dimensional laser-guided grid system, overlaying the entire dry dock. If the ship could be stood on its end, it would be taller than London's Canary Wharf Tower. Yet the acceptable margin of error in putting the deck blocks together was incredibly small.
Difference is now 10 millimeters. We are adjusting that 10 millimeters away. So maybe I allow 5 millimeters.
For the crane operator, this also meant twisting and turning the load by just millimeters at a time. Elsewhere, less delicate testing was conducted on the ship's lifeboats to ensure they could withstand heavy seas. The world's largest cruise ship has the largest lifeboats.
It should be operational, so I mean, it can have a slight crack or a minor damage, but you should still be able to operate the boat. That's the criteria.
To meet the required criteria, testing included a dramatic drop to simulate the unlikely event of an emergency.
Obviously, we're hoping for the best. It's an extremely important test for us to make sure that the boat can handle the impact. Even though you may see a little bit of damage and some cracking and things like that, the boat is made to withstand that kind of thing and then still be seaworthy, still be able to take all the passengers and crew safely away from the ship.
It wasn't so dramatic.
You don't think so?
No. At least
I thought it was dramatic enough.
Yeah, well, it's something about hitting the water.
The world's biggest lifeboat survived the beating and was declared fit for service.
Okay, here we are on deck 7, another cabin deck. You can see the balconies are already in place.
From the early stages of planning and construction, the ship's captain, Bill Wright, kept a close eye on progress.
But this view here is really an amazing one. This is looking down on the main theater, and it really gives you a sense of the size and the dimensions.
That's right, yeah.
Of course, this view, nobody will be able to experience this in a couple more weeks when the decks come on top, but right now it's really special.
Yeah.
And then further forward, you can see on 2 decks down, you can see the beginnings of what will be the crew dining room. And then beyond that, you'll have the 4 bow thrusters and eventually the bulbous bow.
Yeah.
I hope they measured correctly. There's not going to be a lot of room left.
At all stages of building and design, the project was kept secret. But inside the dock, emerging features, such as the unique atrium, couldn't be concealed.
You have the...
Yeah, you can see the drawing, yeah.
It's dramatic on paper, but in real life, it's just out of this world. So there's 3 more sections that are coming further aft, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
The ship soon towered high above the dry dock. From the waterline, it would stretch 72 meters high. The bow was also put together in huge pieces, making the ship a staggering 360 meters long, the equivalent of around 3.5 football pitches. As the upper decks also took shape, the 2 halves of the all-important bridge were lifted into place, one of the widest ever built. Built outside the shipyard, the cabins, known as staterooms, were ferried in by the truckload. The prefabricated cabins were then inserted into temporary holes in the hull. Each stateroom arrived with basic fittings already installed. Once in position, the wiring and plumbing could be connected to the ship's mains. Inside the bridge, a more complex wiring job awaited electrical engineers. As the nerve center of all operations, a staggering 5,300 kilometers of cables and wires radiated from the bridge to all parts of the ship. Wiring extended from the very aft of the ship to the bridge, through all the decks from top to bottom, and from almost every piece of machinery on board. The futuristic-looking electrically powered propulsion units are known as Azipods. Although they're capped with a familiar-looking propeller, Azipods are remarkably different from standard propulsion systems. providing power and steering. They replaced the traditional propeller shafts and rudder.
Each one of these huge propellers can rotate 360 degrees, providing me as the captain and the ship handler with a remarkable level of precision in maneuvering the ship. These propellers are works of art in themselves, polished to a high degree to make sure that we're getting the absolute best efficiency out of them.
Unlike most standard ship screws, the Azipod propellers pull the vessel forward, allowing an undisturbed flow of water to reach the blades first, increasing capacity and fuel efficiency. With the bridge and propulsion systems in place, the ship was crowned with another pioneering design, the funnels. Dangling from a crane, the unique design feature wasn't obvious. But these are no ordinary funnels. They're equipped with one of the most important innovations on board the ship. They had to work if the vessel was going to make it out for its maiden voyage. They're retractable, the creation of two confident inventors. Designing, building and fitting the retractable funnels cost millions, and all for a mechanism that would only be used once, to allow the ship to pass under a Danish bridge that stood between the dock and the sea.
Of course, we strongly believe that it works fine.
We don't need luck, we are so good designers.
They wouldn't have too long to wait to see if their invention worked. The ship was ready to be floated for the first time.
It's very exciting, and we feel a bit proud of it, of course, too. Being a nice day tomorrow and really seeing the water going into the ship's hull for the first time.
It was the final chance for engineers to inspect below the waterline features, like the bow thrusters, engines at the front of a ship that allow steering without forward movement. These bow thrusters have more power than most other ships have for their main propulsion.
Seems to be good.
Celebrated with a traditional brass band, the float-out was a landmark moment. Even though the world record cruise ship had not been officially christened and named, her name was already etched on the hull. Oasis of the Seas.
How long have we waited for this?
You know, these are memories for a lifetime. This is such a special day, such a special moment for me as captain, but also, you know, for the ship. She's going into her natural element right now.
It was dark by the time the ship finally floated on her own keel. But before they dared to open the dock's port, inspectors boarded the ship. Their task was to move into the lower decks to make sure everything was watertight. Any design flaws or mistakes in the development and building process would become evident. Reports of leaks soon emerged from inside the lower decks.
Yeah, there was a couple of minor leaks in boarding walls, but not any big things. And now everything's okay, and we can continue to float out as planned.
With the leaks under control, the dock's port was opened. After years of top-secret planning and development, the world's biggest cruise ship was finally afloat and moving through the water, but not under her own power. as tugboats maneuvered her out of the dry dock. An unexpected crash shattered the night. More than $1 billion worth of ships slammed into the side of the dry dock, luckily suffering nothing more serious than a few scratches on the paintwork. Once safely docked at the shipyard, a new phase in the building of the world's largest cruise ship could begin. The ship still needed to be fitted with all the luxury appointments and features required for paying guests. For those involved in the long years of planning, design, negotiations and final approvals, it was an exciting time, even though it would still be another year before the ship would make its maiden voyage.
Let's just enjoy it for a second.
Yeah, it's worth enjoying.
Even with the scaffolding, it's a wonderful height. Makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow! This is going to be the money shot.
So is this? Oh, so we have one mock-up inside here.
This is everything we had hoped for. This is really exciting to see it actually come together.
Another unique feature is a rear section open to the ocean. Dubbed the Aqua Theatre, it's a giant open-air theatre with a pool as a stage. Although poolside entertainment was hard to imagine in a freezing Swedish shipyard.
I'm visualizing that I'm in the Caribbean right now and looking out over the Caribbean Sea, so I'm not cold at all.
My concern is that you can see through it to the air.
That's the thinking but somewhere you need to have the support.
Oh yeah, one or two supports, but it's basically floating.
Meanwhile, in the United States, another unique attraction was taking shape. Perhaps the last thing one would expect to find on a ship.
They liked the idea that they were going to have a hand-carved wooden carousel. Oh, by the way, we can only have so many pounds of flammable material on it, and we're a wood carving company.
We're taking out the excess wood due to the fire load restrictions. So anything that isn't going to help hold the figure together or support weight has to come out.
It sounds very simple. We'll put a carousel on the ship. There's a lot more than meets the eye with trying to get this project to work on the ship.
Royal Caribbean's never built a carousel, and we've never built a ship.
Yes, I'm good.
We need to have the structural integrity in the carousel so we can actually handle the movements of the ship.
You know, the idea of actually running a carousel at 5 or 10 degrees is unheard of.
All right, well, it's definitely a different sight looking at this thing on 5 degrees.
I've never seen one run at an angle like that, but it's something that gives us a concept of whether the carousel itself can handle any movement and listing of the ship.
Oh yeah, no, this is going to be the worst you'll ever see, if this. The other challenge that you have with a structure like this is vibration, and that's why we do an extensive vibration and excitation tests to, in a nutshell, confirm that the vibrations that the ship is sending off are not going to harm the carousel. It's sitting on a steel deck, and steel transfers every little bit of noise.
I want you to make kind of a soft jump so that we excite all the parameters inside the rig. So
we're trying to put the vibration that this carousel by itself creates. And then we take these numbers back to Finland, and then we plug those into the model for the ship. And I'm very anxious to see how this is going to compare. So, one way or the other, this carousel will be running on Oasis. There's no question about that.
While testing continued on the sea-bound merry-go-round, back at the shipyard, work to fit the ship's cosmetic features was in full swing. At this stage, the delivery date was just 2 months away. The merry-go-round was one of many attractions still to be installed. In the aft section, what would become the largest pool on any ship was taking shape. The pool that would become center stage for the Aqua Theatre. Once filled with water, the showpiece had to be tested to ensure the planned high diving acts could be performed. The carousel was also making a splash. While some saw it as a bad omen, the cruise line's chief executive was adamant. He wanted a merry-go-round.
Well, they used to say bringing horses or maidens on a ship was bad luck. Neither is true. This is good luck. And this is my good luck horse. You know, it's hard to imagine. From all the time we were talking about it, you know, when we discussed it as an idea, and now we're actually doing it, and I hate to admit it, this is fun.
Another more daring attraction was installed on the sports deck, a flying fox, or zip line.
Just to beef up the safety aspect of the zip line on the ship, because it is a first, we went to a 1/2-inch stainless steel cable, which has an actual braking strength of about 20,000 pounds.
I'm adjusting the tension on the cable because I want to try it at a little bit, have a little more slack in the cable to change the speed and the landing speed.
Also had to upgrade to a lot of stainless steel equipment because of the marine environment.
We are going to put 5 of these bags, which are 50-kilo bags, I think, and we're putting them on the cable so that we can do a load test up to a certain percentage of our working load, just to make sure that the cable hasn't got any defects.
Before the feature was tested on a human subject, a 1/4-ton weight was used to ensure the cable system was safe and sound.
All right, guys, are you ready down on the boardwalk? Boardwalk clear? All right, boardwalk's clear. Okay, guys, whenever you're ready, got the thumbs up. Let's go.
Next run, we're going to go ahead and set up probably for 2 sandbags, which will simulate the average human weight, and let it run, see how it moves a little faster along the line. And after that, we'll be ready for humans to go ahead and give it a run.
It's the first manned try, and we're adjusting the cable tension, so we don't know if it's set right yet, but we'll see.
You can see and understand how high you really are, plus it's an absolute sheer drop when you step off.
Woo, it's a long way down. Yeah.
Once the fittings were in place, those responsible for the interior design could see their plans and models come alive.
I think I'm speaking for everybody when I say we're flying on cloud 9 right now, because this has been almost 6 years of long, hard work, and so everything that we've envisioned is really falling into place and, in many cases, exceeding our expectations.
The crew arrived a few months before departure. They had much to do to get the world's biggest cruise ship operational.
Beautiful, beautiful. The biggest ship in the planet.
Intensive training included testing all of the safety systems. In an emergency, passengers would be relying on the vital lifeboats linked to the sides of the ship. Unlike on other vessels, the lifeboats on the Oasis of the Seas are kept in ready-to-launch positions, directly above the water. Additional inflatable life rafts are also fitted for use by the crew. To get to them quickly from the upper decks, the crew had to ensure they mastered the evacuation chutes. For at least one crew member, the drill was a valuable lesson in how to avoid getting stuck.
I got stuck. You really have to push it.
It's a safety feature all crew members had to be comfortable with.
Oh, nice.
But on the long-awaited delivery day, there was no bailing out for the cruise line company's executives, who finally exchanged a $1.4 billion check to take delivery of the world's biggest cruise ship.
There's a lot of responsibility. Does that mean we can leave and take our ship?
From this point, the 100,000-ton ship belonged to the cruise line company.
Well, I'm now the master of the Oasis of the Seas, the grandest ship I think the world has ever seen, and that's a remarkable feeling. A remarkable feeling.
Captain Bill Wright was soon busy on the bridge with his crew, preparing to begin the voyage to the ship's home port in Florida. It would be the first time that anyone had navigated a ship of this size anywhere in the world.
It's an extremely large ship, and when you get up onto the bridge, you're surrounded by all this technology and all that, but you got to remember how much is behind these walls. But when you're concentrating on the navigation and everything like that, it comes down to the information presented to you.
Their first mission was to bring Oasis of the Seas safely under one of the world's longest bridges. It would be a critical test of the retractable funnels. To make the task even more challenging, they would have to squeeze their ship under the bridge at night. More than 3,000 crew and guests gathered on board to witness the moment. The bridge was closed to traffic, but Captain Wright had done his sums. The ship would fit underneath. Just.
Well, the interesting thing is the air draft of the Oasis, the height of the ship above the water, is 72 meters. The clearance of the Great Bell Bridge, 65 meters. We're going to be going under the bridge at 20 knots. And because the bottom is only going to be about 20 meters under the keel, you create basically a vacuum which pulls the ship down. So we're going to get about 30 centimeters more deep in the water because of this hydrodynamic effect called squat.
While the crew may have been confident, to onlookers, it looked like an impossibly tight squeeze. It was all smooth sailing, just as Captain Wright had predicted. The Oasis of the Seas arrived at her home port of Fort Lauderdale, Florida in November 2009. Before her arrival, the terminal had to be tripled in size to accommodate the more than 6,000 passengers the world record cruise ship can carry.
It's amazing. The weather could not be better. I mean, this is one of the best days I've seen in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm from Fort Lauderdale for a long, long time. And we have all of our crew up on deck with flags, and we can hear them here on the bridge. So so we couldn't ask for a better day for bringing the Oasis of the Seas to her home port.
Towering some 16 stories high, the ship dwarfed hotels and other buildings as it passed along the canal. Only a few weeks after arriving at home port in Florida, Oasis of the Seas sailed with their first guests on board. Suddenly, the Royal Promenade came alive with guests enjoying the shops and restaurants. The architect's dreams became a reality. And for Captain Bill Wright, life on board turned into a routine.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Captain Bill from the bridge on Sunday, January 10th, 2010 at 10 minutes after noon.
Even if her 6,360 passenger capacity seemed shockingly high to some, the amenities and areas quickly swallowed the crowds. Even though her sheer size meant one reviewer didn't get his luggage for many hours and had to join long queues for restaurants, most passengers seemed to enjoy the ride.
Everyone enjoy the boardwalk! Save the waves!
The solarium was a success. The wind tunnel tests ensured the area was airy and open, but not too windy. The crew hoped to keep passengers entertained by day and night. For the captain, the job as the master of the Oasis of the Seas also includes the festivities of the Captain's Night. While guests enjoyed themselves, the situation was different in the galley, the ship's main kitchen. Head chef Johan Petuchnik, once chef at the Royal Court of Norway, assembled the other chefs to taste the menu.
1 hour before we open the dining room, all the chefs come here together. We have the entire menu prepared. We bring it over here, so we make a tasting panel. That means we're going over all the food, we check the food, we taste the food, we look at the presentation, so that we can ensure that everything what goes out in the dining room tonight is first class and there's no mistakes in it all. Okay, let's go then.
The stress was building minutes before dinner was served. Once the guests arrived for the first seating, everything kicked into top gear. Before the evening was over, the galley served some 24,000 plates with food. The main dining room is one of the biggest restaurants in the world, and definitely the biggest on board any ship. Still, it's only one of 24 restaurants on board. As evening fell, the atrium became the oasis on board that everyone envisioned for so many years. On his way to the captain's table in the restaurant, Captain Bill enjoyed a stroll in the park with his wife. He surely remembered the heated discussions a few years back when the original design was presented. A grassy knoll could have been fun too, but no doubt, this is much better. For everybody who has been involved in the project for so many years, the successful completion of a truly complicated construction left many positive memories.
To see what we have created here, this is an amazing achievement for mankind.
So I'm the luckiest guy on the planet being in command of this amazing ship.
Oasis of the Seas claims the title, the world's largest cruise ship. Surpassing the nearest rivals by a wide margin, she will most likely keep the crown for many, many years to come. She's mistress of the seas, and some people say a larger cruise ship will never be built.